Well, good morning. I am waiting on my partner, and he sent me a text message and said, "Hey, I'll be on in a minute." But I mean, if I wait any longer, people are going to be like, "What's going on? Why aren't they going?" So we're going to go ahead and go on, and hopefully our friend Michael will show up here in a little bit. So we are excited to have our friend visit with us today. And Visit has all kinds of news today. Oh, there's our friend Michael. He's down there. I guess I'll let him decide if he's going to. He's going to come in this morning and visit.
Can't miss this.
What happened to you?
Yeah, busy. Super busy day today.
Super busy. So not even one super.
Yeah, two.
It's like double super busy.
Yeah. One of those days.
Okay, well, we don't want to have you be double super busy. That one.
But I can't miss the unveiling of the visit.
Well, it is kind of funny when we get her on here. I'll mention kind of a funny this morning. Oh, Gracie's on this morning. She says, "Good morning, Gracie." And Lisa's on. Good morning. Oh no, that's so sad. Oh, hi, Andrew. Oh, hang in there. Okay, so let's, without further ado, bring in our friend Visit.
Good morning.
Who are you?
Michael's laughing. What we should be talking about is how I've been having stablecoin nightmares since listening to Michael educate me about the latest legislation. So if anyone hasn't heard that, they need to go listen.
Hey, I have a whole lot more because I was looking even farther into it, but we're not going to talk about any of that today. But it is even worse. It's even worse.
Goodness.
Yeah, so I think, yeah. So Lisa's already told us. Oh, we're not live on YouTube. That's weird. Yet. That's weird. It says we're live.
Hey, you got comments from YouTube.
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah, Kimberly's on YouTube. Yeah, that's right. And Andrew's on YouTube. So I don't know what's going on there. So I just, it might be nice for people to know. So why did you decide to, did you make the decision to say, I'm going to come out of the closet, as it were?
Well, I write under a couple of names. I say I grew up Catholic, so I have enough names to use. They give you 4 when you're born, and then you add more. But no, not necessarily my decision, but always knew that writing anonymously under this particular publication would be an advantage for telling the truth, particularly during a really difficult time when the publication launched. We were under some serious censorship. We were being pursued by our own government at several levels. And some of the topics really people hadn't broached before and sort of dragged out into the light. So there were some aspects to it then. I feel like we're in a very different place. Wasn't necessarily my decision. You know, some people said some things, printed some things. And that kind of thing was inevitably going to happen, which is absolutely fine. Kind of God's timing, and the truth will do what it does. Probably the biggest reason, though, is that I chose to work anonymously under V1SUT for a while was that journalism's changed so much with social media, and people have journalists now are building a personal brand, and their writing becomes about that and about being worried about personally being canceled on social media. And I just never wanted my own person to be part of the story. It takes away from everything. So I hope that we can still stay really focused on the content and giving people who've been silenced a voice rather than trying to build likes and clicks.
I mean, honestly, I think you can. I mean, because you've just got a good track record for that. And I was reading an article this morning that a friend sent me from KFOR, and you talk about that. There were articles in the wrong place. The sentence structure wasn't even appropriate. Some sentences didn't have a subject. I couldn't even get, this was K4. I couldn't even get through. I couldn't get through it because I kept
Maybe it was
going.
AI, Jenny. Maybe it was AI, not even.
No, AI could have done better than that. This was a journalism student. I'm serious. I'm not an AI fan, but this was absolutely horrifying. Lisa said I was doxxed and contacted by the media when I had a mere Facebook group during COVID. So yeah, I mean, I think people understand that. All right. So we have both of Lincoln's parents on this morning, and I want to get started with that because it is what you just wrote about. Lisa, you may have to go get an ibuprofen or something. This was I am so angry about what you just wrote about. I almost bled from my eyeballs this morning. So let's get started on that and tell people what is going on.
Yes, let's dive right into that. And to Andrew and Gardenia, who are Lincoln's biological parents, I thank you both for trusting me to tell your story and to continue to, they've been amazing to their honesty.
Hang in there, guys.
They're the ones that went and procured the records that this article is based on. Because, for those of you who are unaware of this story, the original, and you could go ahead and share my screen and I will pull through this. The original article that was posted not long ago told about their son, and it told about very briefly how Lincoln was removed from them in the hospital from DHS, even though Gardenia was actively under the care of the STAR Clinic. And that is a clinic that is for women who struggled with addiction when they get pregnant. She was not using drugs at the time of his birth, which was proved through hospital testing. And if you read through the article, the Lockmans were very open and let me into every bit of their medical records. And it proved that absolutely no drugs in that child's system, and hers. Everything she was saying was true. She was a patient of the STAR Clinic. Regardless, the Cleveland County DHS office stepped in and took emergency custody of Lincoln anyway, 2 days old, I think, 1 or 2 days old. And then it was a battle after that to even come close to getting him back. There was something very different about this case. And Lincoln was immediately placed from the hospital in the home of these two men. These are the Harrisons, Solon and Ryan Harrison. And as we moved through the story, it became apparent that the system wanted to give a child to this couple. They had had 2 other male children in their home as fosters.
Gosh, darn it.
Who didn't work out. They told the worker, a very brave former permanency worker stepped up and gave an interview in this. So I encourage people, if you haven't heard their story, to go back and read this. So he was placed in their home. It almost looked as though the agency was completely favoring this placement. There were concerns about his care in the home that the permanency worker shared with us. Those were pushed up the chain. They were ignored. The system sided with this placement. And then what we find out is that the man on the left had been arrested in 2010 for sexually abusing a minor. Some pretty egregious charges in that. Those records are being hid by Kansas. They will not give them to us. Even the newspaper pulled down any reference of that. And then after they got Lincoln, and that same man had become a public school teacher in Moore, a 6th grade teacher, they went on a cruise. They actually took the child with them on the cruise. And the same man was arrested for molesting a child on the cruise ship. So all of that happened last year. You would think if federal authorities flew these men home with this child after being arrested for child molestation of an unrelated child on the ship, that someone would have checked on Lincoln, that authorities would have stepped in. At that point, when I was writing about it, I didn't even know if Lincoln had been adopted through DHS, ever involved in DHS. And of course, there's very little we can learn about any of that because the agency hides behind privacy laws. They say they're protecting the privacy of the families involved, but it gives them virtual unaccountability in the system. So you would think that the authorities and the FBI and everyone else, and we don't know if the FBI put in a referral about him, but he was not removed from them after that. So when Solon Harrison was eventually indicted on those cruise ship charges, 9 days later, he took his own life. No one checked on Lincoln. The remaining adoptive parent left the state with him. He is in Kansas. We know where he is. We know where he works. DHS knows where he works. He's still getting adoptive payments, still getting medical insurance services, but no one will check on this child. There have been multiple referrals to both Oklahoma and Kansas, and they're screened all out. Yes. So that was the original article. Very hard. No one will talk. The DHS director, Jeffrey Cartmel, will not answer any questions to this publication. J.J. Humphrey, who is a representative in the House, the Oklahoma State House of Representatives, sent a very pointed letter, made it public to both the Attorney General and to DHS Director Cartmel, asking for action on this case. The last time that I was able to speak to Representative Humphreys, there had been absolutely no response on that request from a sitting House member. And people need to understand our legislature is the check and balance. They are the oversight for our state agencies.
Well, apparently not.
True. Yeah, on paper. On paper, they are. So we'll see. There are a few other legislators involved who earlier this week had a meeting with Director Cartmel, still waiting to see what action will be taken from that. But Andrew and Gardenia Lockman were able, because the case involves them, they were able to get the court records through juvenile deprived court. So think district court in Cleveland County down in Norman, where all of the decisions about Lincoln were legally made. And today, Visit released another article. So we have another article that's based on those court documents. And I just want to go through some of it so people truly understand what these documents reveal. And honestly, this is about half of it. So this is all about what I just sort of told you about, and that he wasn't checked on, sort of bleeding. But let me talk about these court documents. So within these court documents, there are some really critical breaches of law on behalf of a state agency. A relative placement was hidden from the court, And think about it. The other checks and balance over Oklahoma Department of Human Services and their child welfare actions is the district court. So the district court by law must be informed of all kinds of critical things about these cases. So having an omission that says a relative tried to take placement of Lincoln and that information never made it to the court is serious. Also, there were concerns that permanency worker I told you about that I was able to interview, she actually left the system over the Lockmans case and the treatment of the Lockmans. She had serious concerns about the quality of care, Lincoln's care within the Harrison's home, his foster and eventually adoptive home. Repeatedly, she asked why this child was even brought into custody. All of those concerns were sent up the chain and they were ignored. And then there was critical parent progress in this case. The first 9 months of the case, the parents were very engaged in visiting with their child, and the worker was able to observe their appropriateness. None of that made it to the court. So I just want to run through this for a few minutes. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to stop me, especially in the comments. So when we look at the critical case information, when Lincoln was born, there was a child protective services worker named Jessica Chevery who was involved. She was down there in Norman. And if you look at the documentation that they presented to the court to get the original emergency removal order, so a child first goes into emergency custody, and then the state has to go through another process to quickly prove that that was valid under the law, okay? So she put in an affidavit to the court about why Lincoln should come into custody, okay? So this is the top of that affidavit. And in that affidavit, she never mentions that, even though she knew, we know that she knew, that the testing from the hospital came back that Gardenia Lockman and her child tested negative for drugs. Nowhere in this document does it say that. And also nowhere in the document does it say that she was under the services of the Star Clinic. So here's a government-funded clinic through the Department of Mental Health, whose purpose is to work with DHS to keep babies with their parents, to keep them with their moms, send them home, and support them at home. This worker ignored that she was even involved in that preventative program, and she never let the court know that that was the case. And the court granted the emergency custody order. You have to ask, would that child have ever come into custody if she had been fully disclosed the conditions of this case?
So did you look up Jessica Chevery? Did you look her up to see anything about her? Does she have a profile anywhere on the web?
It's very scarce. I was able to find some information about her, and I'm doing further research because her residential proximity to the foster parent's home is pretty close. So they're sort of in the same community. She doesn't have a whole lot out there, but her actions suggest that there needs to be more investigation into a potential conflict of interest there. So yes, there are some things. I'm actually collecting some information for a later article about a couple of different conflicts of interest within the Norman department related to the placement.
Wait, though, haven't you and I done an entire show on conflict of interest, and we basically decided that Oklahoma doesn't even understand that term?
Yes, and I think during the last legislative session, when Senate Pro Temp Lonnie Paxton stood up before the Education Committee and declared that they couldn't look at a conflict of interest associated with an appointee, a new appointee to the Board of Education, because then they'd all have to look at themselves in the legislature. He admitted they all have them, therefore they don't count. So we're in a very dangerous place with our elected, both our elected officials and the state bureaucracy, in that.
And people need to know that.
They do. The conflicts of interest are no longer a problem with the elites in the state of Oklahoma, and it's crushing people.
Yep.
So Ms. Chevery did not tell the court any of those things. And then when it came to what's called a family-centered services case, so if you think about if she had been left with the Star Clinic was going to send them home. They would have tested at the time, just like the hospital did, and found out there's no drugs in baby system, no drugs in mom. We're doing well with treatment. We're going to send them home, and we're going to visit and support and continue to help this family. Well, DHS is the one who can put that kind of thing in place. And DHS went through a massive class action lawsuit years ago. They were under what's called the Pinnacle Plan. That was a multi-point plan that was the settlement to this class action lawsuit because kids were so unsafe within the DHS system. And one of the things that they found from that lawsuit was DHS is too quick outside of the law to take kids into state custody. The government needed more bumpers about being able to reach into people's families. So family center services became a huge thing. If at all we can put this child home and just provide services, that's the purpose of the agency. But Ms. Chevery decided on her own and presented to the court that this could not happen in this case, that due to ongoing and chronic pattern of substance abuse, that this child had to come into custody. And so you see, if you're a judge, at first, my mind was pretty hard on the judge in this case. After getting the court documents, I have to let the judge off the hook. There was so much critical information that judge did not have. So the monkey is back on the back of DHS on this now. They unlawfully withheld this information. And so if you think about, if the court had had that information, they could have done one of two things. They could have said, no, we're not bringing this child into custody. Or they could have said, we're not bringing this child into custody, but we're going to put a family-centered services case into effect, and we're going to offer services. And we're going to send this baby home. Go ahead.
Well, Katie, do we know, like, can Jessica just make that decision by herself and it's not checked and balanced, somewhere up or down the system?
That's a good question.
Within DHS?
No, she cannot. So that's a very good question. Everything a frontline child welfare worker does, whether that is child protective services, that's the ones who go out and investigate, and if a child needs to be brought into custody, bring that information back to the court, it all goes through a supervisor. And a woman named Jennifer Baker was the supervisor in this case all the way through. So this was signed off by people higher up than Jessica, okay? What we don't know, because these are the court records. We do not have the child welfare records. We do not know what Jessica put into the system about this. We don't know that. So we do know that the permanency worker who then took over the case, so after CPS is finished, then another worker in the office, a permanency worker, is assigned to the case, right? And that permanency worker did an extensive interview. She did know. She went and found the records, and she knew that mom and baby had tested negative. She called the Star Clinic. She talked to them about Gardenia's services. In the Star Clinic, she informs that the Star Clinic said that she was doing well and they were comfortable. Their plan was to send the baby home with her. So this permanency worker was doing her job. When we get a little further, actually, we can talk about it now. Her name was Akitha Washington. She no longer lives in the state, and she's outside the reach of any of these folks. So she very bravely was willing to talk to me about this. She had the case for 9 months. She had concerns about the foster home. She brought them up, pushed them up the chain. She found out the real conditions of this case, questioned why this child was brought into custody, why it wasn't a family-centered services case. She was ignored about that. And she never got to present those points to the court because the case wasn't adjudicated while she was there. Approximately 9 months. And I'm going to talk about that now because this is really critical for people to understand. Oklahoma state law says DHS can get an emergency custody order. But then their policy says within 30 days, we're going to stand in front of the case and we're going to have it adjudicated. That is where DHS proves that they met the threshold of risk of harm to a child in state law that says, yes, we need to take this child into state custody. Well, that typically happens within 30 days. There's different time frames to it, sort of warnings to DHS in the law. You can't just keep somebody's kid. You have to prove it. And then there's this right here in the middle. There's this piece, everything's in Title 10A about child welfare, that says if the case isn't adjudicated in 180 days, 6 months of having someone's child, which would be egregious, actually the child's no longer in custody. So there's that check and balance in the law. This particular case was not adjudicated. Had it been within that time frame, had it been, then this permanency worker would have been able to submit her permanency reports to the court every 90 days. She would have stood before the court and said to a judge with her own mouth, I'm concerned about the placement. I'm concerned. I don't know why this kid's in custody. She could have said those things both in a report and verbally at the 90-day hearings, but it didn't happen. When we look at this, the Lockmans, actually this worker informed the Lockmans, we're beyond the 180 days, and I've never had a case not be adjudicated. I don't get it. Here's the law. I'm here to help you through this system. And the Lockmans said, well, then we don't want to give him back from a visitation.
That's
the
right.
law says he's no longer in your custody. Well, there was more police where the placement wards became involved. The state office of DHS became involved. And what the permanency worker said to me over here separately, and the Lockman said to me separately, is they got another emergency custody order to keep him longer. So,
No.
but wait, DHS told the parents and the worker that they got an emergency custody order, a second one, instead of adjudicating the case. I cannot find that second order anywhere in court records. I cannot verify that that second order even exists.
No.
Wow.
Yes. So that is huge. That is huge. And let me tell you about the totality of these records. The Lockmans went, Gardenia Lockman went, she requested all records on this case from the district court in Cleveland County, and she got a massive amount of paperwork. I have been through all of it. I cannot find that there was a second order. What the documentation does suggest is that the case was likely adjudicated on October 7th of 2021. This kid came into custody when he was born in December of 2020. That is more than 400 days past the removal. So this is serious. This is something that I don't know how DHS doesn't have to answer for this now that it's public. So the other thing.
Well, so basically they broke their own law.
They broke their own law and their own policy in multiple places. Yes, that's what it appears.
They just get to do whatever they want, and Jeffrey Cartmill doesn't need to answer you, and we're just gonna forget about it. It's not my kid. What do I care?
So far, there's been no response from DHS. Multiple attempts. And I will tell you, I've been pretty aggressive. I've even reached out on his personal social media and direct messaged him and asked him for comment on this case. They're very aware of it. There are legislators who are seeking the same thing. And Director Cartmill has not been the director of DHS for very long. He was at the Office of Juvenile Affairs before. So he's not a new bureaucrat. He's been in the system.
And there was a problem at the Bureau of Juvenile Affairs while he was there, if I remember correctly. The FBI had to come in and investigate something while he was at the Bureau of Juvenile Affairs.
So there was a youth congregate care facility in Tulsa.
That was it.
That had an absolute culture of child abuse. And they did have to step in. And many people tried to whistleblow about that for a long time.
So there's a pattern here. Jeffrey Cartmill apparently doesn't answer to state law.
That didn't stick. Sorry about that. I'm taking that down.
And that went right over the part about the fact that the head of DHS has already been in trouble when he was the head of juvenile affairs, and just doesn't seem to be able to do this job.
Correct. I don't know much else about him. I've never had an interaction. This is the first time that I've ever asked for any comment from him. But I can tell you that the records are not forthcoming. To legislators, they are not forthcoming.
This bothers me. Gardenia says, I knew all of this was wrong. I knew Title 10A like the back of my hand, and they just made me feel stupid when I threw a fit at first, and then one at the 180 day, and then my religious beliefs. So
yes, it leaves speechless. And
it does.
Thank you, Gardenia. That was a good reminder. So if you go back to the other article, I just want to reiterate that DHS did not make the Lockmans aware. They actually hid from them that they had placed their child with 2 men.
Oh
and
my
that came up
gosh.
to the 6-month mark right there at the 180 days, like Gardenia is saying, and that the permanency worker cites the same thing. The Lockmans, the law says that the family's religious preferences and objections should be taken into consideration. And when they asserted those rights, they were ignored. The child was not removed from the home. So we may need a minute to process that, but I think the next thing is probably even bigger. That was in with the records. So people need to understand that under Title 10A, one of the most important things that happens in a DHS case is that the agency must always and constantly show the court at every hearing that they're making reasonable efforts to return that child to a relative placement. They call it a kinship placement. So that's not just at the beginning when they remove a child and put the child into foster care. Oops, we can't find family. They have to make constant, reasonable efforts. And they have to tell the court about those efforts. The court holds them responsible every hearing for those records. In this case, I'm not even sure how to say this. They just hid a viable relative placement from the court. So Andrew's biological brother, his name's Eugene, and his wife Angie live in Texas. They are a married couple with a home who are raising their own healthy children. They are very financially stable. And they reached out in the case to Akitha Washington, who was the first permanency worker who's whistleblowing about this. And she was working with them because they specifically said that they wanted to take custody of Lincoln. So that is a viable, you cannot ignore that. While they were working with Akitha and talking to her is when Akitha left the system over the Lockman case and a new worker came on. So the communication just went dead and they were very concerned. They couldn't get a hold of anybody about Lincoln's case. And they have given me their emails of their efforts to try and get Lincoln. And I just included some of them in the article so people can understand this couple was sincerely trying to get their nephew. And they finally, in August of 2021, when they could get no one, reached out to the referral line. There's an open email referral line where you can report suspected child abuse. They had no luck, so they went to this line and they said, we've been trying to do this. We're trying, quote, to find out what the options are for my wife and I to take custody. They get an answer from the referral line that they're going to find the right worker. They send it to the supervisor, Jennifer Baker, in Cleveland County. And she writes back and she says here, thanks for reaching out. Akitha Washington is no longer with the agency. Here's Rosemary is your new worker. And I've blocked out her phone number and gives the phone number. This couple was so eager and worried about Lincoln that they immediately reply and said, thank you, Rosemary. I know it's the weekend, but we're available for a call if you have time. So it just shows the urgency that they've been trying to get in touch with DHS and be placement, keep this child within their extended family. They report, I was able to contact them and interview them both jointly on the phone. And they said that Rosemary Love informed them that they could not be placement at the time because the case goal was still to return Lincoln to Andrew and Gardenia, their biological parents. That was the case goal. And there's no way they could remove them from Oklahoma because they need to visit with Lincoln. So the couple basically said, okay, we understand that. If things change, we want to know. That was the phone conversation. When things changed very quickly and the case goal became adoption because the Lockmans were pressured to relinquish their rights, and were told that if they did not relinquish and they were terminated on, that they would never be able to keep a future child in Oklahoma in the future.
They were threatened.
Yes, and that is not uncommon. There's something statutorily here that these workers have wrong. That gets repeated a lot. I've heard it from several different families that they had pressure, or I've even heard from families involved with DHS. If you don't relinquish on this younger one, we're going to have to take the older one. What sense does that make? So Rosemary Love, they weren't in contact with her again. And then the case goal changed. They never got in touch with the paternal aunt and uncle, and he was adopted by the Harrisons. The court was never aware that Eugene and Angie Lockman were seeking placement or had been in contact with DHS. It is no court reports.
Can I stick a question in here before we go on? So I didn't realize this, but we have several viewers on Rumble and the chat isn't working. So I just found, okay, there. Is there a way citizens can inform the judges of this information?
Oh,
so like, can citizens do an intervention and go to the court and go, stop this?
I don't see why not. So in the district courts, typically you have one or two elected district judges, and then you have appointed district judges. The elected district judges are the oversight for the appointed judges. Every single county, including Cleveland County, lists those judges on their website. And I think any concerned citizen, I think it's a fantastic idea, should be letting the judges know that they're not getting the information. So let me click over here and tell you who the judge is. Don't get seasick. That makes me seasick for sure. Where is she in this?
Because we need to put out something, when I write this up this afternoon. That's the judge.
That is the judge. Her name is Associate District Judge Bethany Stanley. And that's Oklahoma Judicial District 21, Bethany Stanley. Now, Bethany Stanley took the bench, the juvenile deprived docket, down in Norman just 3 weeks before Lincoln was born. Which, denoted a shift. And it looks like she was new to the bench, and now it's clear she did not have the pertinent information to make accurate decisions in this case.
Well, I thought that was a great question because I think we definitely should do that. I'll put that in the write-up on this case, and we'll just start seeing if we can't get people to send letters. I mean, just snail mail if I can't find her email address, to tell her that this case has got to be revisited ASAP.
Yes. So I want to talk a little bit just about the new worker that was put on the case. The first permanency worker told me is that they gave the case to a worker that she described as far more compliant to leadership. And this is Rosemary Love. I am not slamming Rosemary Love. I do not know her. I have not interviewed her, but we need to know that she's a 2019. She got her bachelor's in 2019 at the University of Oklahoma through their School of Social Work. Higher education is not doing us any favors in social work. And if you look on the right, that is an LGBT advocacy scholarship that is being promoted on Facebook by the OU School of Social Work. So students, potentially, they're talking about it's a great scholarship for those who are interested, are potentially rewarded for their LGBT advocacy within the work of social work. How is that affecting her work as a child welfare permanency worker? And for her to omit things from the court, I liken it a bit to journalism. So when I got my degree in journalism, if you had submitted a piece in school that said that you had a foregone conclusion or you had an ulterior motive from the beginning, they would have red penned it up. It would have been an F. You would have been out of there. I get things now from the OU School of Journalism, and I have for years, that are about community journalism. They're actually teaching it. They do workshops. It's part of their fundraising. And community journalism means you have a stance, like climate change, and you go into every piece trying to help that stance. So we look at how that they're being educated in our higher ed institutions, and I believe it's part of the problem.
Let me stick this in. So Gardenia said, Judge Stanley is in the big courthouse now. She isn't in the juvenile at the Couch Center now. I wanted to show off Lane, their other little baby, when I went to get this record, but she wasn't the judge that was there. So and she says, not saying that she isn't a juvenile court judge. Mm-hmm. And she was a social worker that didn't have kids. And yes, it was hell having her as a caseworker.
And that's another thing that's always been a problem in child welfare. You have mostly female workers, predominantly coming out of school. They're always understaffed, so they're hiring really inexperienced people who a lot of them don't have families. They don't know what it's like to parent. She's correct. They don't know what the challenges of parenting are like firsthand. I think it makes a difference. So
I do too, because you just don't have. As a parent, I can just feel, I feel so much for Gardenia and Andrew. It just, you just feel that. It just breaks your heart. What if that was my kid? And that does not seem right to me at all, that these people can deal with children and families, but not have a conceptual idea, anything other than a conceptual idea of what that means.
Well, I find it interesting that in this post on the bottom left, so this is also from the OU School of Social Work, and they highlight Rosemary Love, and they talk about her bachelor's in social work and that she completed a year-long practicum in child welfare, becoming a social worker, and now she's a permanency worker for Cleveland County. And quote, she is hopeful that her role working with families will give them the support they need to make necessary changes. So she seems completely aware that she is in a support role, that she is serving those families, but no one was going to remove this child from the care of the Harrisons. There were roadblocks all the way along, including the omission of case evidence. So
Lisa says, 1 second, I just want to make sure that Gardenia has seen this. Have you contacted Spike Cohen? I don't know who this is. Lisa does. With You Are the Power. He has reunited families in your position. I don't know who that is, Gardenia, but I trust Lisa. So you might look him up and see if that works. And this is a good point that John Boy makes. Keep in mind too, a lot of the college professors teaching this stuff don't have kids themselves. They've just only done these studies. So again, it's a whole bunch of people that don't really have any kind of buy-in into the system that they're actually processing people through.
That's a really good point. And Lisa, I tagged Spike Cohen on Twitter with this article this morning. So I remember you said that before, and so I tagged him on this one. Hopefully he will pick it up. Anyone who wants to pester him on social media and try to get him to pick it up, or repost that article on Twitter. I actually put quite a few people posted in there that could make a really big difference in expanding the public pressure on this case.
Okay.
So the other thing that disturbed me a lot about these court documents, actually there's a huge list, but I tried to pick the most egregious, was that Solon and Ryan Harrison were allowed to fill out a form that is not necessarily, it's not one of the things that a child welfare worker has to do to present to the court. It's an optional form, and you'll see it says optional form that Rosemary Love, the second permanency worker, had Solon and Ryan Harrison fill out. It's called the Resource Parent Report to the Court. And what this did, they were moving toward terminating the Lockmans' parental rights. And this gave the placement's opinion of what was going on with the parents, what was going on with the child. It's chilling, because what we know now is a child molester gave his information to the court to make a decision about ending parent rights. And I have a hard time saying that without getting a little choked. Where are we that our agency is so groomed that they couldn't see everything that other people saw, and they actually blocked it? So this particular form goes on to glowingly talk about how well Lincoln's doing in their care. That was not worker Akitha Washington's assessment at all. She was pushing her concerns up the chain until she was no longer on this case. And then they go on, and you can read the whole thing. I didn't comment much on it because it speaks for itself. They say they have no concerns for Lincoln's emotional health, but when visits, which means with his biological parents, were still happening, he was clearly upset by them and the change in his routine. He would return from the visit scared and confused. It was clear Lincoln did not feel comfortable on these visits or during the approximate 1 hour of transport. When he came back home, all he wanted to do was be very close to his foster parents and ensure that we are not going anywhere or leaving him. This is upsetting to witness. According to Lincoln's teachers, he's uncomfortable being picked up with anyone other than his foster parents. So let me translate this for you. A DHS worker was going and picking up Lincoln from daycare to take him to their court-ordered rightful visits, and they are fighting this. And this is written by someone who is indicted, federally indicted for child abuse. And then they go on to talk about the Lincolns and talking about how Lincoln needs permanency and saying how they make excuses for not coming to visits and those kind of things. What's not anywhere in this court, this is in the court report, this went to the court, the judge saw this, but what's not in the court report is that for the first 9 months of the case, the Lockmans never missed a visit. Their worker said they were completely appropriate. The court never saw that information. And that progress stopped at some point because the system was crushing these people who were really trying to put their family on track. And I can't imagine the stress and emotional pressure. It's worse. It's every parent's worst nightmare. So that things eventually went south when DHS wasn't following any of the laws and they felt powerless is justified.
You know, our friend on Twitter says baby had Stockholm syndrome.
We don't know. We don't know if any of what's written in this report is true.
Just saying, it sure sounds like it.
Yes, and Akitha Washington told me there was no nurturance in the home. That was one of the things she was concerned about: physical care, feeding, all of the basics she had concerns about. But she said there was no nurturance, there was no cuddling, there was no sort of nurturance even between the two men. There didn't seem to be a bond. And you have to remember, Ryan Harrison is younger than his former spouse. And it is believed that he was the victim of the 2010 arrest, where Solon Harrison faced sodomy charges with a minor. So you start to look at this situation and say, Lincoln is now in Kansas with the victim of the other adoptive parent, potentially. And no one wants to check in. No one in government wants to check in.
So Andrew says a minute ago, thank you for all that you guys are doing. Well, Andrew, your government should be not doing this to you. I mean, I'm so angry. I just can't have, but you know, it's bad enough what's going on with this family. I mean, that's horrific. But when you look at the fact that this happens across agencies, We have gotten to the point where the bureaucrats are running the funny farm. There's no we the people here because they just get together and run it on their own. There's no oversight. Nobody will do anything about it. And it's absolute. Honestly, I don't see how it doesn't need to just be burned down. I mean, just burned down. I mean, nobody's willing to do it. We have elected officials like our Governor Stitt. Governor Stitt, you could be doing something about this. And you love to talk about how important families are, and you just love families and kids. So long as you're giving tax dollars away to parents who don't need it, put their kids in private school, you're all about kids. But I'm sure trying to figure out how you're about kids, if you can't stop everything that you're doing and rectify this complete and utter wrong now.
Well, and heck, Jenny, I was just looking. A.G. Drummond, one of his campaign points is protect Oklahoma families. Literally, that's one of his platform points. And I want to ask Katy, with Aletha, did she get removed? Did she get why did she leave her spot? Did she just have enough of DHS to go somewhere else, or do we know anything about her?
She actually left DHS of her own accord. She left the state and she left the profession. She was an over 12-year permanency worker who, when the Lockmans described her to me, that she would repeatedly say, I am all about reunification. She was about helping families and putting kids back with their families where they belong. She had two cases, this one and another one that she described to me, which I don't really want to go into that because I don't know if she technically gave me permission on that. And since I was directly involved with the Lockmans, I can speak on their behalf. There were two cases that she said she couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't be involved in harming children and harming families. So she walked away.
So this is where we are right now, too. You know, the good people are leaving government because they screw you over, or in my case, they fire you from a volunteer position because they don't want you rocking the boat and doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. Stories like these are all too common and will drive. And this is why I put this up. Any of you people who are adjacent to or in government at all, make sure you hear this. Stories like these are all too common, and they will drive people to reject help, not seek medical care, ignore issues and symptoms, all because they're scared of DHS and what they'll do to their family.
That is such a true statement.
Yep.
And in interviewing Gardenia, one of the things that she said to me, this is a very smart, very honest, very kind person. And one of the things she said to me was, I didn't know it till later, but the mistake I made was telling them the truth in the hospital. And that's a sad state of affairs where the agencies that we give money to support these families are using the truth against them rather than helping them.
So we have another comment on Rumble this morning who says, you remember the referral hotline that you put up? We may need to put that back up.
I got it.
She said, anybody can reach out to that referral hotline. And yes, any citizen can initiate a review that way. I'm going to write that down and put that in there and suggest that everybody call that. So the abuse hotline, is that what we're calling on?
Yep, the Oklahoma Child Abuse Hotline. And truthfully, if you want to know state law, anyone who suspects a child is at threat of harm, you don't have to know, you don't have to be peeking in the windows. If you suspect it based on information you have, which you all have now, you are mandated by law to report that suspected child abuse to this number, 1-800-522-3511. So once you have a minute with that one, I'll also give you the Kansas hotline because originally in the original article, I made a referral. So did the Lockmans. And then called back, because if you were the reporter of the referral by law, you can call back and you can find out what the status is of that particular referral.
Interesting. Okay.
You can find out as the reporter if it was assigned for an investigation or if it was screened out, which means they're not even going to look into it for some reason. They're supposed to tell you why it was screened out. And if it was assigned for investigation, they are supposed to tell you if it's a priority 1, which means they have to seek out that child and lay eyes on that child within 24 hours, or a priority 2, which means it's not as urgent and they have some days to get out there. So just know your right when you make a referral. First of all, know your responsibility. We're all mandated reporters as soon as we know about this. And your right is, as a reporter, they need to update you about the status of the case when you call back. And I did. I called back and they told me it was screened out. And then they told me, because we know he's in Kansas,
they told you that?
They told me that. Yes. I said, I am the reporter. This is my name. This is my referral number. I need to know the status. And they said it was screened out. And I said, why was it screened out? And we tried to talk through that. And then I said, well, they said because he was out of state. I said, yes, I know I told you he was out of state, and that you all have the exact address where he is through his Sooner Care Services and through the adoptive payments going to the remaining adoptive parent. And they said, oh, yes. And I asked, has Kansas, well, they said it's Kansas's jurisdiction. Has Kansas's, it's called Child and Family Services. Is Kansas's agency, equivalent agency, been made aware of that? And she said, yes, they have. So I called Kansas. They had not been notified by Oklahoma. They had no record of that. So now that you all have that,
ask this question, because this is a good question too. Will doing this endanger Lane, which is their new child?
I do not. So it's different for me to say this because I've been in the home of this family to speak with them about this case. And I've seen this beautiful, healthy, loved child being cared for live in a wonderful environment. So I cannot imagine that DHS could make any case against this functioning family.
Gardenia says it will not. So
what's the reference when we call those numbers? Just his name, or is there like a specific piece of information?
Yes, absolutely. So I think that what we should do is, because the more pertinent information that you have, the better this will go for DHS. And I think we need to find a way to put his location into something and getting it out to folks, to your viewers. So I have a current address for the child, and that gives us the county in which the investigation should be initiated in Kansas. So let me work with Jenny and have us put out something for those who are interested in making a referral.
Yeah, because I'll do it.
I mean, you could call now and say, this is about Lincoln Lockman Harrison, and his date of birth is listed right here. You can give that information. This is also the Kansas equivalent of their child abuse hotline, 1-800-922-5330. But yes, I can provide that information. I do have that information.
Good, because we have our commenter, one of our commenters on Rumble this morning said, should we gather a standard wording before calling?
That's probably a really good idea.
Yeah.
Well, because I think it might not be a bad idea.
If
everybody's calling and saying the same thing, then maybe they're just going to go, oh, crap, this is actually concerted now. I mean, people are, you know what I mean?
I think it's a fantastic idea.
Good job, my nachos.
And that's something that we could run by the Lockmans and make sure that that it's appropriate for them and get that out to you. I will tell you, I do know that there have been multiple referrals beyond myself and the Lockmans. There was another podcast that put this out, and with a very large viewership, and called for people to make referrals. I have heard nothing about an investigation on those. So I think it's going to take a tidal wave of referrals.
A tsunami.
Yep. Yep, I'm all for that. So to wrap up this particular topic, this is, less than 2 years after that form was filed that gave the Harrison's opinion to the court about the Lockman's rights being terminated. He was arrested again. That was the cruise ship arrest. So less than 2 years. So clearly there were things there. This is Director Jeffrey Cartmel, who has yet to answer about any of this or give any insight as to DHS's position or their planned actions to ensure Lincoln's safety. And I just find it ironic when a family, an Oklahoma family, allegedly places a child in harm's way, Oklahoma Department of Human Services is there. When DHS does the same thing, they refuse all inquiries. It's so ironic. This is what their agency is supposed to do, keep kids safe. So when it's your own doing, whether willfully or not, our government should step up and correct its mistakes.
Well, we've got Gabe Woolley on Instagram this morning. He's watching, and we know what's gone on with Gabe's family. I'm wanting to know how many families DHS is trafficking their children.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good, so the stats aren't there. We should have more public stats about, we do have some stats about how many kids come into custody for everyone that is not returned to their family. That those should be tracked. The public should know. That is where things go off the rails and families are ruined and kids are harmed. So
Lisa has this is pretty good. I don't know what you think about it. And maybe Gardenia can say. We're part of a group of concerned citizens and voters who are increasingly concerned about Lincoln's whereabouts and the government workers who approved his removal.
It's a great sentence.
It's pithy, it's to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Katie, what's the remedy? I mean, can DHS just remove the child and give him back? Does it have to go through an Oklahoma court? Is Kansas DHS involved, or a Kansas court? What actually has to happen to?
Yes, what should have been happening is Oklahoma should have contacted Kansas, and Kansas should have initiated an investigation. Kansas also screened it out. But what should happen is they should go in with the protocols that they have for any time a child is unsafe. They should be going into this home. They should be forensically interviewing not just Lincoln, but also the 2 other boys who spent time in the home. The justification for this is that this child's been placed for, he was placed for 4 years with someone who's been arrested for crimes against children. That is a credible threat of harm. So that should be happening. They should be interviewing Ryan Harrison as to what he knew or what his involvement was. Or is there abuse on that side? We don't know. There should be a thorough investigation of all of those things. And according to law, if they substantiate that abuse, then they have to go through a legal removal process from who is the legal parent now, which is Ryan Harrison. Should they substantiate abuse, they have to take action. But they have yet to initiate that process.
So Gabe said, I sent a text message to a former state representative in Kansas. I'm asking her to connect me to some current state representatives in the state. I do think that would be helpful. Thanks for that, Gabe. And then I wanted to point out, so on Rumble, one of the commenters says, I just want to say DHS gets a bad rap as a whole, and there are certainly issues, but please keep in mind, there are really good God-fearing men and women who are working for the right causes. There are also districts that are very understaffed and suffer insufficient leadership.
I would not disagree with that. This is very much like the reporting that I've done about predators in the public school system. No one is more upset about those predators than good, protected teachers who care about kids. And I think the same holds true for the child welfare system. This is hard work. The people who do it well, do it by the law. It is very hard work, and I respect that a lot. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking
Yeah,
about
no.
the system, and the system makes it hard on good workers. Look at Keitha Washington.
Yep.
The system crushed her and pushed her out when she wasn't going to do what her superiors wanted her to do. So thank you for making that comment. And I'm very supportive of people who are willing to fight to help families and return kids to their homes.
Well, and my nachos has another really good question. Since it's interstate, since now that the child is in Kansas, can't the federal government get involved? Can't the FBI be involved? They're the ones that do kidnapping cases.
That's a really good point. That is a very good point, because if Ryan Harrison was cognizant of his partner's abuse of children or participated in it, and after his partner's death and the attention on the case, he fled Oklahoma, and we have posts. He did a GoFundMe where he said, I need to get out of the state, for the purpose of avoiding culpability on that with the child. You would think that the FBI could become involved. There was a case that I reported on, I won't give details, where that was the case, where someone followed someone over, a minor, over state lines for the purposes of abuse, and the FBI stepped in.
Okay, I messed it up. I'll have to, Michael, I'll have to fix it. Gardenia said she called the FBI and they said keep on DHS. I need to call them back and let them know they're not doing anything.
Correct.
And then Lisa says, sorry, Rumble commenter, the not all workers are bad argument is a weak one when the entire department is corrupt and evil. The presence of a chocolate chip doesn't negate the presence. Okay, well all right, well that's okay.
Well, I would say this: if we can't get the top of the agency to respond to this with urgency, then I have huge concerns for the whole system. That doesn't mean there aren't good workers stuck in a bad system trying to do good things.
But I think what, and I get what Julie is saying here. I'm sorry, but why aren't the good ones turning in the abuse cases and shouting from the rooftops about the systemic problems? That is, and Michael, you and I have made this argument gazillions of times. There's no counting it, where we've said, if the good teachers would stand up in the school and say, no, I'm not teaching them about sex, or no, I'm not going to teach them about, LGBT, whatever. I'm just going to teach. I mean, if we would have them stand up, things could get better, but you don't hear the teachers standing up going, fight, fight, fight. You hear, I'm leaving, like the one social worker, I'm leaving because you people suck and you won't let me do my job.
Mm-hmm. It is. When people's livelihoods and paychecks are involved, there's a lot of pressure not to. And if you think about DHS and any government systems seem to be set up to self-investigate their own misconduct. We see that in schools. They use these Title IX investigations to internally investigate what they call teacher misconduct, right? That shouldn't be happening. If that's a crime, they shouldn't be internally investigating. And in DHS, we also have a closed loop. So let's say that I'm a worker and I know that this child's in a placement where they're at risk of harm and my supervisors won't listen. So I put in a referral that this child is at risk of harm. The system is going to screen out that referral. It's a closed loop, just like they screened out our referrals about risk of harm to Lincoln Lockman. We need to be in a place where the checks and balances are, again, fully informed and not colluding.
Yeah, because John Boy says those who stand up who are the new target. And then Lisa says they don't stand up because when they do, they're shot down. Good people can be shot down only so many times before they jump ship for their own sanity. And Sherry says they're afraid of losing their jobs. And Gabe says OCCY was created to hold DHS accountable, but they've essentially been disarmed.
Yes, that is very true. So OCCY is supposed to oversee these cases and make judgments on these cases. There's also something called PARB, P-A-R-B, which is the local board at the county level that reviews cases. There actually was a PARB review in the court documents But again, the PARB reviewer had none of the information that was withheld from the court. So of course they're going to review the case and come down with no bad decisions were made.
Yeah.
If you obfuscate and it's not in records, they can't make the correct decision. So now the oversight has been misinformed.
That's a great point.
Katie, did you know the context of Representative Humphrey's letter to the AG? Did he have in there this additional information with the 180 days and stuff like that from?
I can probably find that.
I mean, I'd just like to see what he sent in. I mean, I'd like to. I'm gonna go talk to my rep with both of these articles in Edmond and say I want some action taken on the legislative side. This is total BS.
Yeah, and you just think about how many people are out there other than, Gardini and Andrew who are having the same problem.
Yeah.
Julia says the Bible says, don't fear, be courageous, link arms to do good the way the predators link arms to cover up their evil. And I agree with that. Eliminate DHS and return it to the churches. This is why Robert Scott is one of my favorite people in the whole world, because he agrees with me. I only like people who agree with me, you remember. Maybe keep a few workers in each county to oversee, but you know what? That's 150%. We took all these things away from private organizations because we said, remember we had the Baptist Home for Children, and they still have some out there, but that used to be the biggest. They used to run, I think, the Berry House and all kinds of different places for kids who were in trouble and all and then what happens? Government comes in and just pushes them out.
And there came a point when the Baptist Homes for Children stopped taking as many, if any, DHS cases, and they were taking, family referring kids who needed to be with them for a while, that kind of a thing. I'm not sure what that was, but the agency may have become unworkable for them. But this is, I just put up on the screen if you want to share it. This is Representative Humphreys, and this is from the State House of Representatives website. And he actually talks about how Gardenia sought treatment and that they took appropriate steps to ensure safety. And he does talk about some of those things. The full letter, we can look at the full letter.
Yeah, my Nachos is putting up the links on Rumble in case you're over on Rumble.
Okay. He says the story of Lincoln Lockman exposes a starkly different reality where government agencies and courts meet, parents are powerless. So he does go through this and he talks about how they did take steps. He would not have been aware at the time of writing this letter that of the inconsistencies in the court records, because the Lockmans just provided that to me recently. So I think informing him of the new information on the case will be important, as well as Gabe Woolley, who's on here, Representative Gabe Woolley, understanding that what the court documents say, omit, don't say, and what laws have been broken.
Yeah, and Dana says OCCY is full of conflicts of interest and won't hold the same agency responsible that provides them a paycheck, which is a problem. And then she also mentions, and Gabe hasn't mentioned it, but I did see them. Gabe has 2 interim studies coming up regarding DHS, and we do really have to get behind Gabe on this, and I will put those out, and we'll have to have Gabe back on the program. I hope you're still on, Gabe, and are listening. Reach out when you're getting ready to do that, and we'll put you on, even if we have to do a special program, just so that we can get the information out so that people can come. Because I do think what happens with those interim studies is that when people don't come, and then the leadership thinks, oh, people don't really care, they're not all that ginned up about it. What we need to do is when Gabe blah, 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 blah. When Gabe gets those interim studies out there and we've got dates for them and everything, guys, we're going to have to just show up and sit at those studies, because these people have got to know that we're watching, and we know what's happened with Lincoln and other, and Gabe's nephew. We've got to just watch and go.
Yes.
Watch and go.
You're right. I mean, when we think about those interim studies, people think there's something for the legislators to sit at. They need to become the new protest for concerned citizens who think that their government has become unaccountable. I would love to see that whole rotunda filled on the day of an interim study where people can't even get into the room.
Me too. Because you can always sit outside and say, and with little signs with things like clean up DHS or fire Jeffrey Cartmel or whatever it is. I'm sorry, Jeffrey Cartmel, but if you're not going to pay attention here, then maybe you deserve to go bye. Lisa says, I personally know parents who will not report obvious abuse they witnessed because they're terrified DHS will investigate them and take their children away. So the original abuse continues. And, I'm going to say something. I'm just going to make a personal comment. We raised a child who was an adopted child who was had mental issues. And we were scared to death because we had two of our own and her sister in the house. And there was a constant tension in our house between my husband and I about we can't really get help, because if we get help and they find out that she's in the house and she's, losing her mind. It was one of the scariest times I've ever had as a parent, and we were scared to death of DHS, scared to death. And we might have been able to get her some better help. I don't know. She is on medication now, but
it's become an authoritarian system, and people should not fear taxpayer provided services.
People, what is that saying? When people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me get a couple. I know we want to transfer over and get this other thing done. Just a second.
Important.
The general public needs to be able to voice concerns in the interim study. And that's a good point too. I get sick of our interim study.
Yes.
Whatever that thing is, where you can't speak as the public. They'll take your dang tax dollars and they'll do with it whatever they want, but they're not going to let you talk about where those can go or hold your government responsible.
Yes. And they're, in a 2-hour or less session, are you really able to present enough evidence to get them to institute a grand jury, to get them to, to get somebody to move forward on any of this in 2 hours on a major topic like overreach by child welfare? I don't think so. I think the interim studies, where they used to be useful, are a place where it looks in the public and the media reports on them. Whoa, our legislators are doing something. And then they most often go nowhere. So I think bringing public pressure in with the interim study is a fantastic strategy.
Julie didn't even know. Julia likes to go to them. So I guess we'll be seeing each other there, Jules. And Julie says she didn't even know they were open. DHS is the modern boogeyman. I agree with that. CPS in California is every bit as terrifying. We were terrified of our child when we went through foster training.
Yes.
Bias and one-sided information. So my nachos, I wish you would watch every week, my nachos, because you've had some great comments today. So he asks, so this is a great question. is there a clearinghouse for all the articles and videos regarding this case? It may help to consolidate the info so we can just send one source to the government employees we tell about this. And I can, you know how I usually, after we do a video, you know, I write about it and put it up on the website, write a blog about it, put it up on the website. And my nachos, I will put as many Baba Yaga. DHS as Baba Yaga. We do, if you'll work with me, and you put it up on your blog, I'll put on your Substack, I'll put it up on the website. And if we could get one like document in both places where people could share, I think that would be helpful. What do you think?
Excellent. So what I will do is on the top of the Visit website, I'm going to put something up where on the top banner, you can click directly on the Lincoln Lockman case, and everything that I've written about it will be there.
Okay. Gabe says, I'm going to tweet that out. You should tweet that out. It's a good one. I think I have that on the libertyoklahoma.org website. That's one of the quotes that's on the bottom of the second page. There's a scroll about that has Liberty quotes that I put up there, and one of them is this is that particular one. We also need Katy or Gardenia to give us an approved list of people to call and email addresses to mail. So I think we've done a pretty good job here. I mean, with your fabulous, phenomenal reporting, my nacho says outstanding now. I think if we'll just work together real fast this afternoon, we can probably get that out to everybody. So don't forget rope2.org and V1SUT.com.
And thank you to the Lockmans again. I just want everybody, if you can keep them in your prayers, living through this for this many years and having it come back up in such a real way as they fight to save their child has been really taxing. And I just want them to know you're in my prayers, and all these people care about what happens.
Yeah. Oh, we do care, guys. We do. You just got to hang in there, and we'll do what we can, and hopefully that'll help other people that are having the same problem. Because I'm absolutely certain that if there's one, that's just the smoke, and the fire is somewhere else. So
yes. Okay.
All right. So do we want to go on really quickly, even though it's 1:22? You want to go real quickly to the school lunches?
Yeah, I find it really interesting. Maybe we can transition here into something. That's Lisa saying she's praying so hard for you, Lockmans. That's great. So we're moving into an interesting election season, and Superintendent Welters recently put out a mandate that all schools need to use the funds that they get from taxpayers to at least give kids lunch, right? Which you would think would be just kind of a common thing. We meet kids' basic needs, but it was, the political first started flying, which I found really interesting. So you can go read this. I actually got an opportunity, thank you, Superintendent Welters, to sit down with the superintendent and talk a little bit about this, because I knew it was about a lot more than food. And we did sit down. He made this announcement. You can read it. And he was really adamant that they have enough money. And I just walked through some of the stats and did some research as far as the things he was asserting. And he's very much right about a lot of the things he's asserting about bureaucratic bloat in public education, that the money's been going to the administrators disproportionately in a crazy steep curve over recent years. So just of interest, I'll tell you just a few of those.
Michael. Big shock.
Of course, Rob Miller, who up until very recently was the superintendent of Bixby Public Schools. Before that, he was with Jenks. And just so you know, Jenks is where former Superintendent Joy Hoffmeister hailed from. She was sort of recommended into the process to the Secretary of Education from the Jenks superintendent at the time. At that time, Rob Miller was there as like an assistant superintendent of something of that nature.
And he will be on the program in September. The September the 10th, he has agreed to come on the program. So put that on your calendar, because whoever's watching, one of you guys asked me to make sure I got him on. So He is coming on.
I think that's great. I might throw you a few questions. So it was just interesting, the response to this mandate. So Rob Miller, Superintendent Miller, came out with a post saying sort of this was political stunts, threatening, that kind of thing, saying you're going to feed all kids. And if you look down here, I just found it so interesting that he basically said real leadership would have handled it very differently. And he goes through all the people that should have been engaged in the process. And we've got to talk about it for some years here. And then he said we should have advocated for legislative solutions, right? Get everybody's opinions and take the long road, essentially, which I found extremely interesting, given he wants to be the superintendent. So we sort of have this mirror of what's happening in our federal politics. We have the sort of Biden can't possibly close the border because it would take legislation, and Senator Langford telling us we would have to legislate this. And then Trump comes in and slams the border shut and sort of proves that untrue. So we kind of have the same thing going on in our upcoming superintendent's race. I know Superintendent Walters hasn't declared whether he's running for re-election or something else or anything like that. So I have no insider information on that. But when you look at the two takes on this, just feed them, we give you enough money, and we need to get everybody involved and talk about this for a while. It's really interesting. I'm just going to hit a couple of high points. Superintendent has a point about administrative salaries going up. So if you look at the OSDE data, the annual cost per student just for administrative expenses. So we look at what did it cost to feed them? What did it cost to do this and that? Administrative expenses, when I looked from 2017-18 that year to 23-24, went up 46% per student in Oklahoma. So he's correct about that. And despite this, the Oklahoma Education Coalition, I don't know if you know about them, but that is sort of a catch-all for all of the unions, the teachers unions in Oklahoma, school administrators unions, the school board administrators unions, the rural schools, all of those folks in the education establishment are the Oklahoma Education Coalition. So I went there to sort of look, what are they saying about administrative costs? Have they gotten too high? They have this graphic still up right now saying, are Oklahoma schools top heavy? That's not what the data shows. This is a graph from 2012.
2012.
And it does not show, it doesn't show what you think it does. It compares administration, student to administrator ratios to surrounding states, as though we have to keep up with surrounding states with our administrator ratios. Well, the funny thing about this, and you can go look further at this, it's actually a hoot. The funny thing about this is the national statistics. This is from 2000 to 2019. And this is the Center for Education Statistics. This is the U.S. Department of Education. District administrators have risen 87, almost 88% in that time frame, in those 19 years. The number of teachers, about 9%. The number of students, about 8%. So they have a massive amount of money. Superintendent Walters actually, in his budget request to our legislature, asked for a reduction in funding. Instead, they gave him an increase to the education portion of the budget. And this is what's happened in our per student spending over the years. So it caps out here at 2024 at 11, almost 12,000. According to the superintendent, it will be around $13,000 per student this year. And we've just seen that not affect, if anything, while this was rising, student outcomes were falling. Well,
yeah, I was going to say, we can't get the kids to read, but by God, we can get an administrator over them.
Yes. So just if you have a chance, peruse through the article. The other thing that was really interesting is when I looked at spending that was happening, we had this increase in spending, but where's it going? Because Superintendent Walters was very insistent. It's not going to the kids. It's not going to raise scores. It's going to administration. It's going to these other things. We just got to cut that out. Well, when you look, almost half of public expenditures in Oklahoma per student are going outside of the classroom to non-instructional expenses. When you look at federal dollars, coming into our schools, 60% are going to non-instructional things. So they're going not to the classroom, not to pay the teacher, not to buy books, not to buy materials. They're going to non-instructional expenses. So we don't have a funding crisis. We have a spending crisis.
Yep.
In education.
But in everything.
Well, a superintendent kept saying, if we could just lower administrative costs by 6%, you could easily feed all of the kids. And then the other thing that I went and looked at after the interview is, what are their options? What are their options for feeding kids? And this is what I find so interesting. Most of our schools are opting to do the free and reduced lunch plan, which is so labor heavy. They have to track every single kid that's free every single day, reduced. There's massive reporting. There's staff in the lunchroom. There's staff at the district level. There's staff at the State Department of Ed with this program dealing with all this reporting. And there's staff at U.S. Department of Education. So this is a very labor heavy option, right? For them to get funding just for those kids, just for the free and reduced kids. You have to send out individual applications to households. Every school is dealing with all this. It is so paperwork heavy. There's another option for feeding kids that allows schools to feed all of them without a lot of that bureaucracy. Basically, the government for once said, if you have this many kids free and reduced, you might as well, efficiency would say, you might as well feed them all. It's cheaper to feed them all, right? So this is the community eligibility option. Since 2023, 90% of our schools have been eligible for that. Less than half of those eligible are taking that money, have applied for that, and are opting that. They would rather have the more people, the more bureaucracy, and feed some than less people, less bureaucracy, less positions, and feed all. So not to belabor the point, but go take a look, because I really dug into it. Oklahoma City and Tulsa have been doing this and feeding everyone. Same with Lawton, Midwest City Schools, Midwest City, Del City, Putnam City. But there are a lot of other big districts, Moore, Enid, Broken Arrow, Union, Mustang, Yukon, Jenks, that chose not to participate. And something that I found interesting is Norman. They're only serving through community eligibility about a third of their sites when they could be serving all. And they pay their superintendent over $400,000 a year. So the juxtaposition is kind of shocking. Rob Miller comes from the candidate, other Republican candidate for state superintendent. He comes from Bixby, and Bixby is one of just a few districts, Edmond, Bixby, Deer Creek, just a handful of others that are too affluent to qualify for the program.
Okay.
So there's just 10%.
Well, then if they're too affluent to even apply, then they should have enough money to feed the kids.
Correct. And
just thinking through it, maybe.
Exactly. So they pushed up the threshold in 2023 after, the pandemic, when schools were feeding everybody and all these meals, and they pushed up the threshold for this program. They look at what they do so that the schools don't have to do the data. If you're eligible for SNAP, if you're eligible for WIC, those food entitlement programs, they automatically give the schools the data. It's on the State Department of Ed website. This is your percentage. Well, they pushed that percentage up from 25% of the students, somebody in the household qualifying for one of those programs, to 40% of the students. And that made almost the whole state eligible.
Wow.
Don't really understand why they're not doing it. I mean, do you remember recently when they were attacking the State Department of Ed for not, he wants to say something, for not applying for funding and not letting schools, I thought you were saying goodbye, not letting schools have these funds, and Walters isn't taking these funds and he's hurting children. For years, they've been not taking these funds. I don't get it. Okay, Michael, please.
I'm just raising my hand for Lisa's comment. I agree. I'm in. Her last
I'm going to get to comments here in just a minute.
I'll raise it all the way up.
Raise your hand if you want to abolish all three-letter agencies at high noon today.
Yes.
I'll raise 2.
Abolish acronym agencies.
Lisa said, I see you, Michael.
But go and take a look, because I actually go on the government's own website. USDA is in charge of these programs. And I go on and I calculate. They're very generous. I calculate what a school like, I used Moore because they're one of the biggest schools that's not participating and they have a pretty high rate. they have 40% of kids on this program. The government will do the maximum reimbursement for almost 67%. And then they're going to give you something for the other kids too. So it's interesting. I did Enid as well. Enid, 53% of kids are on one of these programs or households. So that the government will give maximum reimbursement for 85% of those lunches. But they're not taking it. They're not taking it. They'd rather have an extra lunch lady and somebody who's a director of child nutrition in the district office.
So we have got some great comments. So over here on Rumble, and I love the fact, thank you people for being on Rumble today, because I've pretty much written Rumble off. So thank you so much for being here. My Nacho said the Oklahoma Education Syndicate, the coalition you were talking about, he said we should name them the Oklahoma Education Syndicate. And he said Kansas has had a similar increase in per student spending with little return on investment. Why don't we audit the Oklahoma DOE before giving them one more dime? And we still haven't gotten that audit, have we? The Department of Education? Did Cindy do that one yet?
I have no knowledge of that coming out.
I think there might be one that she's still doing. Schools consistently hounded me for turning in a free and reduced lunch form, even though I knew we didn't qualify. And I love this one. This is all in caps. Why does the superintendent make $400,000 a year?
He's not the only one that makes $400,000 a year in Oklahoma. If you look, that's another interesting data exercise I'd like to do, is take the top 10 paid superintendents in Oklahoma and track it over the years, because it has skyrocketed. I remember when we were up in arms not long ago that they were making over $200,000 a year. Yeah. And now we have multiples making over $4.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's crazy to me because I'm like, actual scientists who do things like in labs make less than that. I mean, you have school superintendents making more than people with multiple doctoral degrees in and I'm going to just say this, and Rob can chastise me when he comes on in a couple of months. Important stuff, like really hard stuff. Don't see the superintendent as deserving $400,000. I'm sorry. I don't. You're not a doctor. You're not a attorney. You're
the president of the United States. His salary is $400,000 a year when he is taking a salary. So the leader of the free world makes less than the superintendent of Norman.
Yeah, that's literally ridiculous. And Gracie makes a good point. She says we're required to pay taxes for schools that we're required to send our kids to all day. It's only right for our tax dollars to go toward feeding them as well as educating them. And Lisa says it's shocking how we used to feed schools better meals while also providing all the supplies with much less taxpayer dollars just a few decades ago. What a shock. And John Boy says, a question presented to me when I ran for county commissioner: why is a school employee making $60,000 a year to answer the phone and file a few things when the school has less than 150 kids, K-12, and the 3-year-old preschool program? Sorry, that would buy a whole lot of food for kids or educational information for kids. Absolutely. Yep. Education is the favorite means to grow our insatiable government. $13,000 per kid with not much going to the kids. No wonder schools are dying to keep those seats filled. Makes sense, doesn't it? Would be nice if they'd feed them healthy food while they were at it. Hey, but I thought more money was supposed to go to improve our ROI.
Correct.
And this is my comment. I close the cafeterias and have mom send a PBJ sandwich. Put the milk in a vending machine. I really despise school lunches because it keeps it's just another way to make a kid-free parent. So now the schools will feed them, in some cases they'll even clothe them. I remember when my kids went, "Oh, do you need a shirt, honey?" I mean, it's just the most ridiculous thing. We don't need parents anymore because we have schools. If you really can't afford lunch, you know what you should do? Have some parents in the school volunteer to make lunches for the kids who can't afford it.
So, I mean,
then parents would be in the schools, and I don't want that, Jenny.
I know.
that's a strong point. I will say to a couple of these comments, part of Superintendent Walter's mandate hinted that they will be incorporating some of the MAHA, get the toxins and the dyes and the unhealthy food out of school lunches. So we'll be watching for more details on that. Also, I wanted to share this quote that he talked about. It's not just that we're adding all of these positions and that we're increasing salaries, but he kind of stopped in the middle of talking and said, just to be clear, you know why they're hiring all of their buddies. Why does government grow? Why do bureaucracies go? One of the reasons is because if I'm a superintendent and I hire 4 assistant superintendents and they hire their staff, you know what? I just now put away a lot of my job. There is not as much as I have to do. So they're making more to do less, which I found was an interesting point. And then the other thing that I really feel like people need to understand is because of the current structure of school lunches and the free and reduced and everything, there are kids, and we cite cases here, who show up in the lunch line, they're not free or reduced, and parents forgot to put money in the account, and they don't get fed that day. Some districts just don't feed them. They don't let them run an account. So that's not right. That is not right to let a kid go through the day hungry, right? We shouldn't be doing that in a public institution. And then the others have them rack up this debt. These families rack up debt they can't pay for. And we know this because just last year, the Arby's Foundation stepped in and gave $1 million across the nation to pay off approximately 30 million in total school lunch debt. That's what they did a bunch here. 27,000 went to Edmond, Michael. So they've been indebting parents in the lunchroom, 21,000 to Clinton, Noble, Jay, Collinsville. These are big numbers of debt. Parents pay for the whole building. They pay every salary. They pay their property taxes. Why are they getting another bill?
Good question.
Wow.
Lisa said, but some moms won't feed their kids, so the school needs to. It's kind of like sex ed.
Yep.
Julia says, close the best barn too, so parents will be at the school at least twice a day. And then my Nacho says, in the military, we had to get a performance report every year to justify our retention promotions. Why not require them for superintendents?
Mm-hmm. Well, coming back to, Jenny could probably talk pretty closely to that. Both of you have worked with school boards. They don't understand that they're the ones approving these $400,000 salaries.
Yeah.
They don't understand that they are in charge.
Well, they're talked out of it. They're propagandized against believing that. Sherry said, I started tracking school lunches in Choctaw when I looked into the admins and how long they'd been there over the 18 years, and there were 10 predators. And Nacho says, I agree with the comment that they're fighting this just because it was from Superintendent Walters, just like the Democrats turned down the COVID help from President Trump.
That's a really good point. I will tell you, I did try to talk to a superintendent to a school board president from one of the big districts that's in the article here, and asked her about why they weren't participating in that community eligibility program. Why aren't you taking the money? And her response was, yeah, we don't really weigh in on those things about child nutrition. So we know that at least some of the school boards are abdicating those decisions to administration, and they don't even really understand what the options for feeding are. Huge part of the financial management of the district. So it's kind of interesting that school board members aren't making some of those decisions.
Well, I think, again, they're told they can't or whatever. Lisa says, I don't mean to sound heartless, but school is an educational institution. We really weren't supposed to feed them. I remember when I was growing up, there was no bus service. There was we did get milk. Like for a snack or whatever, but we never got meals. None of that stuff. And man, it's just And she says now they're wanting to make it a medical one. Where does it end? And I think that's the important thing, and the thing that we need to really be concerned about it. When do we put our foot down? When do we say enough is enough? When do we say, sorry, parent, this is on you now?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I think the inner libertarian in all of us would like to go back and say we shouldn't have government schools. But now we're in a position where we do, and they're really well funded, and we have to hold them accountable for using it efficiently. And if it is actually more fiscally efficient to feed all students under one of these programs than to be doing what they're doing and hiring more people, we should be calling that out.
Yeah, my nacho says wraparound services, and that is the term that they use. It's disgusting.
That is.
And Renee says, I think the school boards are the source of the problem. And Michael and I agree with that 100%. It is. So,
well, Katy, I've said it multiple times on here. I don't know if you heard, I didn't say it while you were on the show, but when I ran for school board, I was talking to one of the top administrators at Edmond. And this person literally told me, because I was talking about, these are my kids, and, I don't want them making decisions for my kids. This was during COVID.
Okay.
So, this administrator literally told me that they're not my kids, they're our kids, speaking from his point of view. They're our kids because when we started transporting them and feeding them, they became our kids. That was his literal concept of the parents' kids versus the kids or the school's property. I mean, that's his literal concept.
Language is very important, isn't it?
Well, and again, there are legal maxims that if you, like, for example, if you give your property to people for so long, it becomes their property, whether there's an exchange of money or not at all. I mean, and that's what we've done. We've treated children as chattel, as property, and now they're property of a school. And this is a parent problem. It's an absolute parent problem. We have trained parents not to parent their kids, and that the kids are in charge of the parents. That's what we've trained them like that.
I don't disagree, but I would say, hearing Michael's story, which I'm still processing, I would also say there's been a massive shift in the training of education institutions. They don't talk about boundaries anymore. As far as families are concerned, they used to train about boundaries. You don't walk over that line in a conversation, a decision, and those kind of things. And there's also been a huge shift in professionalism in public education. If you walk into high schools and you can't tell the kids by dress, demeanor, and conduct from the faculty, things have changed a lot. And they use those words all the time. They're my kids. You see it in social media. My kids, my classroom, my kids. That language shouldn't be tolerated because it walks all over those boundaries. You are there to serve families. You do not own these children.
But parents are happy to give up that ownership.
I don't think most of them are. I really don't think most of them are. I think a lot of people are angry about it.
I don't know anymore. I think they only get angry when something happens that makes them angry. I think they just don't even think about it on a regular basis. I don't think they're engaged enough to think about it on a regular basis. I think we've propagandized them out of thinking about it on a regular basis. So because don't forget, I mean, I was in the classroom, and I can tell you how many days that we would have teacher, parent, anything, where you'd sit there, trying to figure out how to, do 100 things without having a conference because nobody would show up. I mean, nobody literally cared enough to show up. It's like, let's say you were, because everybody who is part of the school blob, well, it's always, all of the problems are caused by the two kids who fill in the blank, right? Well, but I mean, this parent works and she can't come if we have them at this time. Oh, then why doesn't she come when we have them at 9:00 in the morning? Because we canceled the whole day so that we can have parent teacher day or whatever. I mean, it's all BS. I'm sorry. Parents, the majority of them now, and I'm just going to say it because I believe it. The majority of parents don't care. They don't have the time. They're not interested. They need somebody else to do their job for them. They're too, they don't want to, they want to be the fun person. They want to, hey, buddy, let's have your friends over for some beer. I mean, it happens way too many.
I wouldn't disagree, Jenny. And I think you can kind of just to kind of substantiate your point. Look at how many more like early start programs and Head Start deals, the age group keeps dropping, lower and lower. Now you can take your 2-year-olds in, your 3-year-olds in, and you just
your
don't
babies.
You just, as a parent, you just don't have to deal with them or be a parent, until kindergarten. So, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, people don't want to have their entertainment interrupted. I mean, a lot of people are just selfish.
And John Boy, who's also been in the classroom, reminds us of this. How many times has a teacher heard from parents, it's your job?
Yeah.
That's part of the reason I quit. No, it's not my job. It isn't my job. I didn't have the kid for you. You had the kid. It's your job. You do the job. And then they want to get all mad. Well, my kid isn't being educated. What are you doing when the kid comes home from school? Are you even home? Do you have to have a second job to have your boat? I mean, people get so mad when I say stuff like that. And part of the reason they get mad is because they know it's true and I'm right over the target. Yes, there are people who have to work. Yes, there are people that there are those. But that's not who's causing the problem. It's the other ones. I got to have my second job to be able to have my boat. I need to be at home so that I can go get my nails done and hang out with my friends and go get wine for lunch. That's who the problems are.
You got to watch the Thunder game. You got to get your football tickets ordered.
I mean, it's those people that are going to have the absolute fit every time I suggest that you need to take sports away from schools. Sports should not be in the public school. It shouldn't. It just shouldn't. Every time, well, my kid needs to be able to go to college, and that's the only way to do it in these schools. They're supposed to do that. No. I agree, Michael. People are too wrapped up in themselves to realize how much their kids are controlled by the system. And my Nacho says, I was on a PTA board for a spell. My Nachos, we need to have a little lunch because was my experience too. He says, I was on a PTA board for a spell. Their main goal was to raise enough money to buy a digital sign for the street. It's exactly the experience I had. Quail Creek Elementary, supposed to be a blue ribbon school in an affluent community. We raised money because babies had to get on the computer because Putnam City did.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to say to Gracie's comment there, not just the system in general, but now we have this screen epidemic. So you have these kids that are just live, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 16 hours a day on a screen, and that, to me, that's another major problem is you've got all because you see them, Jenny, and you see them, Katy, you just go into the store, a kid's maybe with a mom, but they're on a phone, or you go out to eat or whatever it may be, or you just look at them in the car and the kid's just glued to the phone. I mean, I make a very serious point to constantly, even my oldest who's 20, I'm like, get off your phone, please. Put it down. Yeah. Be a human. Come sit here. Talk to us.
Well, you remember I wrote that article because I got so mad about the fact that I had just read the largest study in the history of studies on the topic of screens that said even 30 minutes will cause kids, anybody under 18, from babies up to 18, will cause them to have behavioral problems.
Yeah.
30 minutes on a screen. So if you're letting your kid come home and get on the computer when they've already been on the computer all day at school.
Yes. Yes. And through the COVID pandemic and all the extra money that flowed, all we heard was, we've got to be one-on-one. We've got to be one-on-one. Well, wouldn't that be great if that was one-on-one human? But that was one device per one kid. And they all got there. Even the rural ones got there. So much of our education, and there's a lot of data to say it's so much less effective than human instruction.
Yeah.
Michael, are you working with my nachos?
No.
He just said, get a screen grab of Jenny's face when she did that little thing with her phone. My nachos are bad. Earl's daughter says, Jenny is testifying today. Yeah, years ago, I tried the PTA and we spent 2 meetings arguing over vending machines. There's not and I did an expose on the PTA once, and this had been years and years ago. And the PTA was literally started by the NEA, so the National Education Association, and the NEA deliberately started the PTA to keep parents from seeing what was going on in the classroom. They wanted to get parents in so that they felt like they were doing something, but then deliberately turn their attention away from what was going in. So when I was at, my kids were at Quail Creek Elementary, and I was very involved. This was before, obviously, we took them out and homeschooled them, and this was a huge reason why. And I was on PTA, and these are a couple of things that I found out when I was on the PTA. So when I said, you know what, we really need to get Saxon math books in here, because they were using the Common Core math that was really not, my youngest son was coming home. I'm not kidding. This was first grade. My youngest son was coming home, and for 1 week they did addition. Then they stopped and they did subtraction. Then they did division. Then they did. Answer me how anybody was going to be able to even get addition. Kids are going to get addition in a week, especially when their parents aren't willing to help them at home with that. The answer is no, it's never going to happen. And I said, well, you know what we need to do is we need to do Saxon math. Why don't we in PTA raise some money so we can get some Saxon math books for every class? And then we can use Saxon math, which spirals and it builds on everything from the beginning. We can't do that. There's no way that we can do that. We already have a contract with this book company. We're not interested in it.
Well, we learned where contracts with book companies come in the library in the last few years, didn't we?
It really honestly is. And then when I started getting politically active and I was on PTA, I was told I couldn't run for the president of PTA because I was politically active. Quail Creek Elementary School.
Yep. We need some changes in public ed.
My nacho says I offered to give a pocket constitution to every student. Crickets. Consistent theme here. Blank addicted parents leaving children to be raised by the state. Parents need to plug back into their family. They really honestly do. And we can't forget this. Back in 2010, I caught OEA giving campaign materials to the PTA at the state capitol.
Hey, we just
absolutely. My child is a great strict device limit.
Weingarten was working for the Democratic Party for 23 years, so that makes a lot of sense.
Who did what?
You know, Randy Weingarten, who was the president of the biggest teachers association. We found out recently when she resigned that she'd been working for the Democrat Party for 23 years, paid.
Yeah. Okay, last one, and then we better get off of here. Can I laugh? 30 minutes of screen time. Now it makes sense. 2 hours. Okay, you know what? I just kicked you out of class, John Boy. I hate being hoisted on my own petard.
Well, we will certainly, we will get together here later this afternoon and we will get that material together so all these amazing viewers who want to advocate for the Lockmans and get justice and get DHS accountable in this case can do so.
And thank you so much for that, Katie. Literally, if you stop and think about it, without your reporting, without you being the person to dig into that, who would have known anything about this?
I appreciate that.
So we just, and then Julie, well, that's me and Julie, and then Julia said, great show once again, much appreciated. Well, again, Katy, we wouldn't have a show without you.
Thank you all. Thank you for letting us bring this case back up and keep the public pressure on, and we'll have more to come on it very, very soon. Appreciate the
well. And I'm with the people who say, prayers too, because I definitely think, we've got to pull in some Jesus on this, because these poor.
I have no doubt God's at work in this. This came to me in such a way that it could only be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, again, Katy, we can't thank you enough. And thank you guys. Thank you for our viewers. And thank you so much. I don't know what happened with Rumble today, but aren't you excited, Michael? We haven't had this on Rumble in a year. So thank you.
I'm glad you didn't give up on Rumble.
No kidding. Because we had a nice audience on Rumble this morning, and my nachos and Renee were making some nice comments. So and thank you to, this is nice. My nacho says, thank you to your families too. They make sacrifices so you can do what you do. I'm going to play that for my husband. That's very nice. He would appreciate that. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you. Have a wonderful day. And I do want to remind you that on Friday, we will have, I expect to have quite a few of you who have been glitching on Friday morning at 9 a.m. when we have State Senator David Bullard, who's going to talk about the initiative petition bill that was signed into law that are going to make the changes. If you've got questions for him and you're unhappy about this is your time. So don't glitch and not show up. So we expect to see hundreds of you on there. Renee says, don't give up on Rumble. We need the option. I expect to see hundreds of you on there Friday morning. So don't glitch if you're not going to show up and ask him the questions. Got it?
Got it.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us. We really, really appreciate it. And we will see you again on Friday morning at 9 a.m. Thanks again to Katy. We really do appreciate her and visit. And thanks, Michael. And we'll see everybody on Friday morning. Bye-bye.